I'm Vanessa, 34, and despite 7 years of marriage to Gregory, I've always felt like an outsider in his family. Last summer at their annual BBQ, I hoped things would finally be different. Gregory's sister Amanda had other plans. While everyone gathered around the picnic table, I tried sharing news about my graphic design work. Amanda interrupted with a smirk. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. The table erupted in laughter, even Gregory. I just raised my hot dog, locked eyes with her, and said, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night. If you're enjoying this story already, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to hear what happened when I reappeared a year later. Gregory and I met during our final year at university. I was studying graphic design while working part-time at a local coffee shop to pay tuition. He was completing his business degree, fully funded by his parents. We connected when he came in for a late-night study session and started chatting about the book I was reading behind the counter. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. By graduation, he proposed with a ring that cost more than my entire student debt. I was swept away by his charm, intelligence, and what I perceived as genuine love. When we married a year later, I thought I was entering not just a partnership, but a new family. The Caldwells were everything my family wasn't: affluent, well-connected, and tight-knit in their own particular way. Richard, Gregory's father, built a successful marketing firm from the ground up. Patricia, his mother, managed their social calendar with military precision while serving on 3 charity boards. Amanda, his sister, followed in their father's footsteps, already a junior executive at his company by 27. Michael, the younger brother, was the family rebel who still somehow landed a cushy job at his uncle's investment firm. My own background couldn't have been more different. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs, I grew up understanding the value of a dollar and the dignity of hard work. My sister Olivia and I shared a bedroom until I left for college. Holidays meant homemade gifts and potluck dinners with neighbors. When I first visited the Caldwells' sprawling colonial home, I felt like I'd stepped onto a movie set. The class differences were subtle but persistent. Patricia would compliment my crafty design work as if it were a cute hobby rather than my profession. Richard would explain basic business concepts to me at dinner, despite my having run my own freelance business for years before meeting Gregory. Amanda would helpfully correct my pronunciation of wine varieties or designer names, always with a saccharine smile. "They mean well," Gregory would say whenever I brought up these microaggressions. "Amanda's just trying to help you fit in. That's how she shows love." But Amanda's love felt more like a slow poison. At our wedding, she gave a maid of honor speech that included several stories about Gregory's ex-girlfriends. When we announced we were buying our first home, she questioned if the neighborhood was really the right fit for a Caldwell. When I landed a major client, she wondered aloud if they hired me because of Gregory's family connections. Despite this, I tried. God, how I tried. I volunteered for Patricia's charity events. I referred clients to Richard's firm. I remembered everyone's birthdays with thoughtful gifts. I laughed at their inside jokes even when they stung. I dressed differently for family gatherings, adopted their vernacular, and swallowed my working-class pride when conversations turned to vacation homes and boarding schools. For the first few years, I maintained my freelance design business, building a modest client list and gaining some recognition in local circles. Then Gregory received an opportunity to expand his division at work, if he was willing to travel extensively. Without discussion, it was assumed I would scale back my career to manage our home life. My business dwindled to a few loyal clients. As I became increasingly isolated, my world narrowing to Gregory's intermittent presence and his family's judgmental orbit. Last spring, I miscarried at 11 weeks. The physical pain was excruciating, but the emotional aftermath was worse. Gregory was in Chicago for a conference. He offered to come home but seemed relieved when I said I could manage. Patricia sent flowers with a note that said, "Perhaps it's for the best until you're more settled." Amanda suggested that stress from trying to maintain your little business might have been a factor. Only Olivia came to stay with me for a week, bringing homemade soup and sitting with me through tear-soaked nights. The contrast between her genuine care and my in-laws' clinical distance cracked something fundamental in me. But I buried it deep. Another disappointment to swallow in service of maintaining family harmony. By the time the annual summer BBQ rolled around, I was a diminished version of myself. My design work had become mechanical, my friendships had atrophied, and my marriage felt increasingly like a performance. Still, I held on to a fragile hope that things could improve, that I could somehow earn genuine acceptance from the family I had married into 7 years ago. The Caldwell Summer BBQ was a neighborhood institution. Patricia spent weeks planning the menu, Richard showcased his collection of grilling gadgets, and dozens of family friends and business associates milled about their perfectly manicured lawn. It was the event where family status was displayed and reinforced, where loyalties were confirmed and outsiders were identified. And despite my years of marriage to Gregory, I remained firmly in the outsider category. The morning of the BBQ, I spent 3 hours making my grandmother's strawberry shortcake, the one dessert that had received genuine compliments in previous years. Gregory was busy on calls, finalizing details for his upcoming business trip to Tokyo. When it was time to leave, he rushed me out the door, concerned about being fashionably late versus actually late. "Remember, Dad's unveiling his new imported smoker today," he reminded me as we drove. "Try to act impressed even if you don't get why it's a big deal." I nodded, clutching my dessert carrier on my lap. My sundress, bought specifically to match Patricia's preferred casual elegance dress code, already felt tight across my shoulders. The Caldwell home bustled with activity when we arrived. Caterers weaved through groups of guests delivering appetizers. Richard stood centered on the patio, surrounded by admiring friends as he demonstrated his new smoker. Patricia floated from cluster to cluster, her laugh tinkling like expensive crystal. "Finally!" Amanda called out, spotting us as we entered through the side gate. She air-kissed Gregory, then gave me a quick once-over. "Vanessa, that dress is so cheerful. The kitchen's getting crowded, but I'm sure you can find somewhere to put your contribution." She swept Gregory away before I could respond, linking her arm through his and launching into a story about running into his college roommate. I stood alone, dessert in hand, scanning the backyard for a friendly face. I made my way to the kitchen, where Patricia was directing the catering staff with precise instructions. "Oh, Vanessa dear," she said, noticing me hovering in the doorway. "You didn't need to bring anything. We have the patisserie handling desserts." She gestured vaguely toward the pantry. "But how thoughtful. Perhaps put it there for now?" I placed my shortcake on a shelf, already crowded with other contributions from guests not worthy of display. As I exited the kitchen, I overheard Patricia instructing a server to make room for Amanda's authentic tiramisu at the center of the dessert table. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of polite smiles and truncated conversations. I'd start chatting with one of Gregory's cousins, only to have them pulled away by Patricia to meet someone important. I offered to help set up the buffet line but was told the caterers had a system. I tried joining a conversation about recent films but couldn't get a word in edgewise. Michael's wife, Charlotte, received entirely different treatment, despite being married into the family for only 2 years. Patricia proudly introduced her to everyone as our Charlotte, the pediatric surgeon. Amanda included her in reminiscences about family vacations she couldn't possibly have attended. Even Richard, who rarely engaged with in-laws, asked detailed questions about her work. The contrast wasn't lost on me, nor was the irony that Charlotte looked as uncomfortable with the attention as I was with the lack of it. When lunchtime arrived, Gregory reappeared at my side, having spent the morning deep in conversation with his father's business associates. "Having fun?" he asked, not waiting for an answer before guiding me toward the elaborate buffet line. We filled our plates and joined the main table on the patio. I ended up seated between Gregory's elderly Uncle Frank, who was hard of hearing, and a space left open for Amanda, who was still serving herself. Gregory sat across from me, already engrossed in conversation with Richard about Japanese business etiquette. Amanda finally arrived, setting her meticulously arranged plate down, and instantly commanding attention with an anecdote about a celebrity she'd spotted at her gym. Charlotte asked appropriate questions. Patricia beamed with pride. Even Frank shifted to hear her better. During a brief lull, I saw my opportunity. "I just finished a branding project for that new bakery downtown," I offered. They're having their grand opening next weekend." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly. "How nice. Is that the place with the tacky neon sign? I drove past it yesterday." "The signage is actually vintage-inspired," I explained. "The owners wanted to honor the building's history as one of the first." "If you disappeared tomorrow," Amanda interrupted with a theatrical sigh, "no one would even notice." That's how boring this conversation is. The table erupted in laughter. Patricia tittered behind her napkin. Richard guffawed. Even Gregory chuckled, reaching for his beer. Frank, who likely hadn't heard the comment, joined in automatically. Tutter. Sound surrounded me like cold water, shocking my system. I felt simultaneously hypervisible and completely invisible. My face burned, but my hands turned ice cold. In that moment, 7 years of accumulated slights crystallized into perfect clarity. Didn't cry. I didn't storm off. I didn't create a scene that would later be recounted as evidence of my emotional instability. Instead, I raised my hot dog in a mock toast, met Amanda's gaze directly, and said clearly, "Challenge accepted." A brief, confused silence fell over the table. Amanda's smile faltered slightly. Gregory looked between us, sensing something had shifted but unable to identify what. Then Patricia chirped, "Who's ready for Richard to carve the brisket?" And the moment passed. For the remainder of the afternoon, I observed rather than participated. I watched how easily they all moved through their world of assumed privilege and belonging. I noted how Gregory seamlessly blended with his family while occasionally throwing me an absent smile. I cataloged every slight, every exclusion, every moment I was spoken over or around. Most importantly, I listened to the quiet voice inside, me that had been whispering for years, now finally loud enough to hear, "You deserve better than this." By the time we gathered our things to leave, my decision was made. The only question remaining was how to implement it. The drive home from the BBQ stretched in silence. Gregory checked emails on his phone, occasionally reading aloud snippets about his Tokyo trip. I stared out the window, mental calculations already running beneath my outward calm. When we reached our driveway, he finally seemed to notice my unusual quiet. "Everything okay? You've been off since lunch." I considered my words carefully. "Amanda's joke about me disappearing. Did you think that was funny?" Gregory sighed, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Don't start with this again. Amanda was just being Amanda. You know how she gets at family gatherings." "You laughed," I said simply. "It was a joke, Vanessa. Not everything needs to be analyzed to death." He got out of the car, effectively ending the conversation. That night, as Gregory slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying not just the day's events but the entire trajectory of our marriage. I thought about the bright, ambitious designer I'd been when we met. I remembered how confidently I'd handled clients, how passionate I'd been about my work, how deeply I'd connected with friends. Somewhere along the way, I'd started believing the subtle message the Caldwells had been sending, that I was lucky to be among them, that my inclusion was conditional upon my compliance, that my worth was determined by their assessment. I slipped out of bed at 2 a.m. and padded to my home office. I opened my laptop and began methodical research, bank accounts, apartment listings in Seattle where Olivia lived, transportation options. By dawn, I had a rudimentary plan. Gregory left for a morning golf game with Richard, kissing me absently, on his way out the door. The moment his car pulled away, I began executing my plan with surprising clarity. First, I called Jessica, my college roommate who had remained loyal despite my increasing isolation. "I need a massive favor," I said when she answered. "Name it," she replied without hesitation. "I'm leaving Gregory. Today. Can you come help me pack the essentials?" 2 hours later, Jessica arrived with coffee, packing supplies, and fierce determination in her eyes. We worked efficiently, identifying what I truly needed versus what could be replaced. Clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and my design equipment took priority. "I can store whatever doesn't fit in your car at my place," Jessica offered, carefully wrapping a framed photo of my mother and me. While Jessica organized the physical items, I handled the financial separation. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account, not a penny more, despite the temptation. I paid my share of the monthly bills that were due. I made a list of subscriptions and services to transfer or cancel. By mid-afternoon, my car was packed with the distilled essence of my life. Jessica hugged me fiercely before getting into her own vehicle. "Call me when you're settled for the night." And Vanessa, I'm proud of you. Alone in what had been our home for 5 years, I wrote Gregory a letter. I kept it simple, stating that I needed time away to reevaluate our marriage. I explained that I had taken only what was indisputably mine and had contributed to outstanding bills. I asked for space and no contact while I sorted through my feelings. I did not share my destination. As a final act, I removed my wedding ring and placed it atop the letter on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I left a copy of Amanda's cruel joke, written verbatim, with the date and location noted clinically. Before leaving, I allowed myself one moment of sentimentality. I picked up our wedding photo from the hall table. We looked so happy, so full of possibility. Gregory's smile reached his eyes back then. My own face shone with hope and confidence I barely recognized now. "Goodbye," I whispered, replacing the frame and walking out the door without looking back. The sensation of driving away from our suburban neighborhood was both terrifying and exhilarating. With each mile marker, the tightness in my chest loosened incrementally. By the time I crossed the state line, I felt like I could fully breathe for the first time in years. I checked into a modest hotel that evening, using the credit card I maintained separately throughout our marriage. The room was simple but clean, nothing like the luxury accommodations the Caldwells considered standard. After confirming my safe arrival to both Jessica and Olivia, I turned off my phone. Gregory would be home by now, finding an empty closet and my letter. The thought brought neither satisfaction nor guilt, only a strange numbness. In the quiet anonymity of the hotel room, I curled under unfamiliar blankets and fell into the deepest sleep I'd had in months. Morning brought the first wave of messages when I briefly turned on my phone. Gregory's communications evolved exactly as I'd expected. Confusion, then irritation, then concern, then anger. "Where are you? Call me. This is ridiculous. Come home so we can talk. Your mother is worried. At least let her know you're safe. You're being incredibly selfish right now. I have the Tokyo trip in 3 days. Fine. Take your space. We'll talk when I get back." Not once did he mention Amanda's joke or his laughter. Not once did he acknowledge any understanding of why I might have left. I sent a brief text to my mother, assuring her of my safety but requesting privacy. Then I turned off my phone again and opened my laptop to search for longer-term accommodations in Seattle. The challenge had been accepted. Now came the hard part, disappearing not just physically, but untangling myself from the identity I'd constructed as Gregory Caldwell's wife. I was about to find out if Amanda was right, if my absence would go completely unnoticed, or if I could rebuild a life where my presence mattered on my own terms. Seattle welcomed me with 3 days of continuous rain, as if washing away my old life. Olivia had found me a month-to-month furnished apartment in her neighborhood, a tiny studio with bay windows and creaking floors. After the sprawling suburban house Gregory and I had shared, the compact space should have felt claustrophobic. Instead, it felt like a snug cocoon. "The building's nothing fancy," Olivia apologized as she helped me carry in my limited belongings. "But the location is great, and the landlord doesn't ask too many questions." "It's perfect," I assured her, running my hand along the worn but solid kitchen counter. "It's just mine." That first week passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union. I set up mail forwarding through Jessica rather than leaving a direct trail. I purchased a new phone with a Seattle area code. I created updated profiles on freelance design platforms, carefully curating my portfolio to remove work connected to Gregory's network. Gregory's messages continued, transitioning from anger to bargaining. "Whatever's going on, we can work through it," he wrote. "Just come home." I maintained my silence, not out of cruelty but self-preservation. Every time I considered responding, I remembered the laughter around that picnic table, the years of subtle diminishment, the gradual erosion of my identity. Amanda posted a passive-aggressive Instagram story 2 weeks after my departure. "Family is everything. You can't choose who stays and who goes." The comments filled with heart emojis from various Caldwell connections. Gregory's mother called my mother, expressing theatrical concern while fishing for information. Michael's wife, Charlotte, sent a tentative text, "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I responded to none of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Jessica shipped the remainder of my belongings in unmarked boxes. I found a therapist specializing in family dynamics and marital trauma, scheduling weekly sessions that often left me emotionally drained but incrementally stronger. "What Amanda said at the barbecue," Dr. Lewis commented during our third session, "that wasn't the cause of your departure. It was the catalyst." "The last straw," I agreed. "Tell me about the first straw," she prompted. That question unlocked a flood of memories, subtle digs disguised as helpful advice, achievements minimized, opinions dismissed, all while Gregory stood by, not malicious but complicit in his silence. By month 2, I had secured 3 steady design clients through online platforms. The work wasn't particularly creative, mostly formatting ebooks and designing social media templates, but it paid the bills. More importantly, each completed project rebuilt my professional confidence. One rainy Tuesday, I walked into a local coffee shop and noticed a striking wall mural. The barista saw me admiring it. "Beautiful, right?" "The owner commissioned it from a local artist," she explained while preparing my latte. "She's looking for someone to redesign our menu boards and promotional materials, actually." An hour later, I was sitting with Eleanor Marshall, the 50-something owner with silver-streaked hair and a straightforward manner I found immediately refreshing. "I don't care about your resume," she said, waving away the portfolio I'd pulled up on my tablet. "Show me your personal work, the stuff you do because you can't not do it." I hesitated, then navigated to a folder I'd barely opened in years. These were designs I'd created for myself. Experimental, sometimes impractical, but authentically mine. Eleanor studied them in silence, occasionally zooming in on details. "You've been hiding," she finally said, looking up with sharp blue eyes. "These are good, really good. But recent?" "No," I admitted. "I haven't done work like this in years." "Why not?" The question was simple but struck like a physical blow. I found myself telling Eleanor an abbreviated version of my story, the creative passion I'd once had, the gradual sublimation of my style to suit the Caldwell aesthetic, the slow surrender of my artistic voice. Eleanor listened without interruption, then nodded once. "You're hired for the menu project, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You do one personal piece, something purely your own, every week. Bring it when we meet. I don't care if it's good or finished. I care that you're finding your voice again." Eleanor became more than a client. She became a mentor, pushing me to reclaim my creative courage with blunt feedback and unexpected encouragement. Through her, I connected with other local business owners needing design work. My calendar slowly filled with projects that engaged rather than depleted me. Meanwhile, Gregory's attempts at contact became less frequent. The divorce papers I filed through my lawyer were met with a barrage of calls that I didn't answer. Eventually, his attorney connected with mine. The proceedings moved forward with clinical efficiency, Gregory's initial resistance giving way to resignation. 4 months into my new life, I allowed myself to check social media. Gregory's profile showed him at a company event, smiling beside a woman I didn't recognize. Richard had posted about the Tokyo expansion, tagging Gregory with proud father emojis. Amanda shared multiple photos from a family dinner, captioned, "Missing no one." The confirmation stung less than I expected. Amanda had been right after all. My disappearance had barely caused a ripple in the Caldwell family pond. Somehow, this validation brought not pain, but liberation. I was no longer defined by their perceptions. 6 months to the day after leaving, I received the finalized divorce papers. Gregory had signed without contesting the straightforward division of assets. We'd negotiated through our lawyers. No alimony either way, a clean split of joint property, complete separation going forward. His only personal communication was a brief note. "I still don't understand, but I won't fight you anymore." That evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and cut my hair, shedding the long style Gregory had always preferred for a modern bob that framed my face. The woman who stared back seemed both familiar and new, thinner perhaps, with faint lines around her eyes, but with a clarity of gaze I hadn't seen in years. By month 8, my design business had expanded enough to require a small workspace outside my apartment. I rented a desk in a cooperative creative studio, surrounded by other independent artists and entrepreneurs. For the first time since college, I had colleagues who valued my input and challenged my ideas on equal footing. When the anniversary of my departure approached, I no longer needed to check social media to know what the Caldwells were doing. They had receded from my daily thoughts, becoming characters in a story I'd lived through rather than active presences in my life. Meanwhile, my new world continued expanding. A branding project for a local artisan food company won regional recognition. My redesign of Eleanor's coffee shop attracted attention from a lifestyle magazine. A comment I made during a design workshop led to an invitation to speak at a creative conference. 1 year after Amanda's fateful joke, I was no longer invisible. I had built a life where my presence was not only noticed but valued, where my voice was heard rather than interrupted, where my contributions were recognized rather than dismissed. The challenge had been met, but the story wasn't over yet. The email from Westwood Creative arrived exactly 52 weeks after the BBQ that changed everything. The subject line was innocuous, "Seeking designer for national campaign," but the content sent a jolt through my system. "Your work for Rainier Artisanal Foods caught our attention. We're developing a campaign for Sheffield consumer brands, and believe your aesthetic would be perfect for the project. Initial meeting next week if interested." Sheffield Consumer Brands was a subsidiary of Caldwell Marketing Group, Richard's company. The coincidence seemed too precise to be accidental. I called Eleanor, who had become my sounding board over the past year. "It could be completely legitimate," she reasoned after. I explained the connection. "Your Rainier campaign was featured in 3 industry publications. But the timing is suspicious," I finished. "The question isn't whether they know who you are," Eleanor said pragmatically. "The question is whether the project is worth taking regardless." I requested more information from Westwood. The project was substantial, redesigning packaging for Sheffield's entire organic line with a potential long-term contract for ongoing brand management. The budget they proposed was double anything I'd handled since establishing my Seattle business. After 3 days of deliberation, I accepted the initial meeting. If this was a Caldwell orchestration, I wanted to face it directly rather than wonder. And if it was legitimate, I didn't want fear of my past to constrain my future. The Westwood creative director, Thomas, made no indication he knew about my history with the Caldwells during our first meeting. We discussed design concepts, timeline, expectations, and budget particulars with straightforward professionalism. When I asked about client involvement, he mentioned only that Sheffield executives would review major milestones. I accepted the project, establishing clear boundaries about communication channels and approval processes. For 3 weeks, everything proceeded normally. My preliminary designs received positive feedback. The timeline remained on track. No Caldwell names appeared on any correspondence. Then came the announcement. Sheffield consumer brands would be featured at the annual Marketing Innovation Gala, unveiling their rebranded organic line as part of the presentation. As the lead designer, my attendance was highly encouraged. The gala was a major industry event, precisely the type of opportunity my rebuilding career needed. It was also exactly the sort of function the Caldwells never missed. Richard considered these networking evenings essential to maintaining the family's business prominence. Gregory had always dutifully followed his lead. "You have 3 options," my therapist observed during our session that week. Decline to attend, and potentially limit your professional growth. Attend and attempt to avoid the Caldwells, which may prove stressful and ultimately futile. Or attend and prepare to engage with them on your terms. "What would you do?" I asked. Dr. Lewis smiled slightly. "I'm more interested in what Vanessa today would do, as opposed to Vanessa from a year ago." The question lingered as I left her office. Last year's Vanessa would have either declined the event entirely or attended as Gregory's apprehensive shadow, dreading Amanda's barbed comments and Patricia's conditional approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. The following morning, I emailed Thomas confirming my attendance. Then I made an appointment with a personal stylist recommended by Olivia and set aside a portion of the Sheffield advance payment for an outfit that would serve as both armor and announcement. The evening of the gala arrived with unexpected calmness. I surveyed my reflection in the hotel room mirror. The woman staring back wore a tailored jumpsuit in deep emerald that managed to be both sophisticated and distinctive in a sea of expected black dresses. My bobbed hair was now accented with subtle caramel highlights. The designer shoes, my one significant splurge, added 3 inches of confidence to my height. Most transformative, however, was the expression in my eyes. No anxiety, no apology, just steady readiness for whatever the night might bring. The venue was a restored historic theater downtown, its grand lobby transformed with strategic lighting and minimalist floral arrangements. I checked in at the registration desk, accepting my name badge and the signature cocktail offered by circulating waitstaff. I had barely taken 2 sips when Thomas appeared at my elbow, already introducing me to a cluster of industry executives. Their business cards disappeared into my clutch as we discussed emerging design trends and market demographics. I found myself speaking with easy authority, my opinions met with thoughtful nods rather than polite dismissal. 40 minutes into the event, I was deep in conversation with a magazine editor when I felt a shift in the room's energy. I didn't need to turn to know that the Caldwells had arrived. Richard's booming laugh confirmed it moments later. I maintained my position, finishing my point about consumer psychology before excusing myself to visit the bar. As I waited for a sparkling water, I carefully scanned the room. Richard and Patricia stood near the entrance, holding court among admirers. Amanda wasn't immediately visible. And then I saw Gregory, standing slightly apart from his parents, looking thinner than I remembered and somehow diminished despite his perfect tailoring. Our eyes met across the crowded space. His widened in unmistakable shock, lips parting slightly as if to speak despite the distance between us. I held his gaze steadily, neither smiling nor frowning, then deliberately turned my attention to the bartender, thanking him for my drink. The first encounter came minutes later. Richard approached while I was examining the event program. "Vanessa," he said, his tone conveying neither warmth nor hostility. "Quite a surprise." "Richard," I nodded, meeting his gaze directly. I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's Organic rebrand. He blinked, momentarily disconcerted by my calm demeanor. I hadn't made the connection. Their creative is being handled externally through Westwood. Yes, I'm working with Thomas's team. The preliminary market testing has been quite positive. I spoke as I would to any client's executive, professional and assured. I see. He seemed to reassess me, noting the changes a year had brought. Your work has evolved since you left. Not evolved, I corrected with a small smile. Returned to its authentic direction. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Patricia is here somewhere. I'm sure she'd want to say hello. Of course, I replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging the prospect. As Richard moved away, presumably to report his discovery to the family, I rejoined the Westwood team, seamlessly integrating into their conversation about upcoming presentation logistics. From the corner of my eye, I could see the ripple effect as Richard spoke to Patricia, whose perfectly maintained composure slipped momentarily as she sought me in the crowd. The Sheffield presentation was scheduled for the middle of the evening. As the time approached, Thomas guided me toward the staging area. We were nearly there when Amanda stepped directly into our path, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and calculation. Vanessa, no one mentioned you were involved with this project. Her tone suggested this oversight was somehow my fault. Amanda, I acknowledged. I'm working with Westwood Creative. Thomas, this is Amanda Caldwell, Richard's daughter. Thomas extended his hand. Ms. Caldwell, pleasure to meet you. Vanessa has been exceptional to work with. You know her work? Amanda's smile tightened. We're family, actually. Or were. How nice, Thomas replied noncommittally. Excuse us, we need to prepare for the presentation. As we walked away, Thomas glanced at me questioningly, but respected my privacy enough not to pry. I appreciated his professionalism more than he could know. The presentation itself passed in a focused blur. I spoke about design philosophy and consumer connection, demonstrated key elements of the rebranding strategy, and answered questions with composed expertise. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive, with several spontaneous rounds of applause. From my position on stage, I could see the entire Caldwell family seated together near the front. Patricia maintained a neutral expression throughout. Richard nodded occasionally at particularly impressive metrics. Amanda whispered something. To the woman beside her, her face unreadable. Gregory watched me with undisguised intensity, his eyes never leaving my face. After the formal presentation concluded, I was immediately surrounded by attendees with questions and compliments. Business. Cards were exchanged, potential opportunities mentioned, connections established. This professional validation, earned entirely through my own merit, felt like the sweetest possible vindication. Eventually, the crowd thinned as people moved toward the dinner portion of the evening. I was gathering my presentation materials when Gregory finally approached, alone. You look well, he offered, hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets. Thank you, I replied simply. I didn't know you were in Seattle. That was intentional. He nodded, accepting this truth. Your presentation was impressive. You always were talented. I always am talented, I corrected gently. Present tense. Gregory looked down, then back up with unexpected directness. I've thought a lot about what happened, about Amanda's joke and everything before that. I didn't understand at first, but this past year has been... He paused, searching for words. Clarifying. I'm glad to hear that, I said, meaning it. I miss you, he admitted quietly. The words hung between us, once so desperately desired but now arriving too late. I felt no triumph in his regret, no vindictive pleasure in his loneliness. Just a calm certainty that I'd made the right choice. I need to join my team for dinner, I said, neither cruel nor encouraging. Will you be at tomorrow's workshop? Yes, I'm presenting the digital integration segment. He nodded again. Maybe we could get coffee afterward? Just to talk. I considered his request, weighing my own emotional landscape. I can spare half an hour, I conceded. Professional courtesy. Relief flickered across his face. Thank you. As I turned to leave, Patricia appeared at Gregory's elbow, her social smile firmly in place. Vanessa, darling, what an absolute delight to see you thriving. Her words were perfect. Her tone betrayed her discomfort. Patricia, I acknowledged. I hope you're well. We've all missed you at family gatherings, she continued, the practiced lie falling easily from her lips. No one makes strawberry shortcake quite like yours. The old Vanessa would have accepted this olive branch, however disingenuous. The new Vanessa held her ground. That's interesting, I replied pleasantly. I recall my shortcake being relegated to the pantry while Amanda's tiramisu took center stage at the last gathering I attended. Patricia's smile faltered briefly before recovering. A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure. Multiple simple misunderstandings over 7 years, I agreed, maintaining my pleasant tone. How fortunate that I now work in environments where such misunderstandings rarely occur. Before Patricia could respond, the event coordinator announced dinner seating. I excused myself with polite finality, joining the Westwood team at their assigned table across the room from the Caldwells. The remainder of the evening passed without further direct interaction, though I occasionally caught Gregory watching, me from afar. As the event concluded, I declined the team's invitation for after-party drinks, preferring the quiet completion of returning to my hotel room alone. In the tranquil privacy of my room, I kicked off my designer shoes and stood at the window overlooking the glittering city. The confrontation I'd half-dreaded for months had come and gone, leaving me not depleted but strengthened. I had faced the Caldwells not as an apologetic outsider, but as a successful professional in my own right. Amanda's challenge, if you disappeared, tomorrow no one would even notice, had precipitated not just my physical departure, but a complete reinvention. The final irony was that by disappearing from their world, I had become more visible in my own. The morning after the gala dawned with unexpected sunshine streaming through my hotel room curtains. I prepared for the day's workshop with methodical focus, selecting a professional but comfortable outfit and reviewing my presentation notes over room service coffee. The Sheffield marketing workshop was being held in the hotel's conference center, a more intimate setting than the previous night's gala. As I arranged my materials at the presenter's table, I spotted Richard engaged in intense conversation with Thomas near the refreshment station. Their discussion appeared businesslike but not tense. Occasionally, Richard would nod or gesture toward the product displays. Attendees gradually filtered in, networking over pastries and coffee before finding seats. I was reviewing my slide deck one final time when Amanda entered, scanning the room with calculated casualness until her gaze landed on me. After a moment's hesitation, she approached, coffee cup clutched perhaps too tightly. "Good morning," she offered, her tone carefully neutral. "Thomas speaks very highly of your work." "Thomas is an excellent creative director," I replied. "The entire Westwood team has been exceptional." Amanda shifted her weight slightly. "I didn't realize you'd established yourself in Seattle. Your presentation last night was impressive." Coming from Amanda, this reluctant acknowledgement was practically effusive praise. I thanked her with simple courtesy, neither overreacting to the compliment nor dismissing it. "Father is considering bringing the entire Sheffield account in-house after this campaign," she continued, watching me closely. "He's been impressed with the direction." I understood the subtext immediately. If Sheffield became a direct Caldwell marketing client, my work would either disappear or be attributed to their in-house team. The old insecurity flickered briefly before I extinguished it. "That would be Richard's prerogative as Sheffield's parent company," I said evenly. "However, Westwood has contractual provisions regarding creative attribution that are quite specific. Thomas is particularly careful about protecting his designer's work." Amanda's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Before she could respond, the workshop facilitator called for everyone to take their seats. Our conversation ended with mutual, professional nods, a far cry from our last interaction over hot dogs and cruel jokes. The morning sessions proceeded efficiently, with presentations on market analysis and consumer demographics. My segment on digital integration strategies was scheduled just before the lunch break. As I took the podium, I noticed Gregory slipping into the back of the room, clearly having timed his arrival for my presentation. I delivered my content with confident expertise, demonstrating how the packaging designs incorporated augmented reality features and seamlessly connected to the broader digital ecosystem. The question period afterward was lively, with engaged participants and thoughtful discussion. When Richard himself asked about implementation timelines, I answered with specific benchmarks already agreed upon with the Sheffield team. As attendees broke for lunch, Gregory made his way toward me, but was intercepted by a Sheffield executive with urgent questions. I used the opportunity to step outside for fresh air, needing a moment away from the Caldwell gravitational pull. The hotel's courtyard garden provided a quiet respite. I had just settled on a bench when Patricia appeared on the pathway, her expression suggesting our meeting wasn't accidental. "You've always had excellent timing for escapes," she observed, smoothing her skirt as she sat beside me uninvited. "I prefer to call it recognizing when I need space," I replied. Patricia studied me with new attention. "You've changed." "I've reverted," I corrected, "to the person I was before I started trying to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me." She sighed lightly. "Families are complicated, Vanessa, especially established ones like ours. There are expectations, traditions, ways things have always been done. I'm aware. I spent 7 years observing those traditions, 7 years trying to meet those expectations. Perhaps we weren't always as welcoming as we could have been," Patricia conceded, the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. "But disappearing without a word was rather dramatic, don't you think?" I turned to face her directly. "I left a detailed letter for Gregory. I ensured all financial obligations were properly handled. I made a clear, adult decision to remove myself from a situation that had become harmful to my well-being. There was nothing dramatic about it." "Gregory was devastated," she countered. "Gregory was inconvenienced," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Patricia's perfectly maintained facade cracked slightly. "You have no idea what this past year has been like for him, for all of us." "You're right," I acknowledged, "just as you have no idea what the previous 7 years were like. For me?" We sat in tense silence for a moment before I continued. "But I'm not interested in exchanging pain metrics, Patricia. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm good at what I do, and my work has value to Sheffield's campaign." Something shifted in Patricia's expression. Not quite respect, but perhaps a new awareness. "You always were stubborn." "Determined," I countered with a small smile. Another distinction worth noting. As we headed back toward the conference center, Patricia asked an unexpected question. "Will you be at the closing dinner tonight?" "Yes. Westwood has a table." She nodded thoughtfully. "The salmon is usually excellent." It was such a normal, mundane observation, the kind mothers-in-law typically share with daughters-in-law, that it momentarily disoriented me. I murmured agreement as we rejoined the workshop, separating to our respective tables. The afternoon sessions focused on implementation strategies. I participated actively but maintained professional distance, neither seeking nor avoiding the Caldwells. As the workshop concluded, Gregory finally managed to approach me directly. "Still up for coffee?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Yes," I agreed. "There's a shop in the lobby." We walked together in silence, the familiarity of his presence beside me both strange and nostalgic. Once seated with our drinks, his usual Americano and my latte, ordered without need for discussion, the awkwardness intensified. "Seattle suits you," he finally offered. "It does," I agreed. "The creative community has been welcoming." Gregory traced the rim of his cup. "I've been in therapy since you left. Dad thought it was unnecessary, but..." He shrugged. "It's been helpful." This surprised me. Gregory had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to tell you what you want to. Here. I'm glad, I said sincerely. My therapist helped me understand some things about our marriage, about my family. He met my eyes directly. About how I failed to see what was happening to you, because it was easier not to. The acknowledgement was unexpected and disarming. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I had fallen in love with. Thoughtful, capable of growth, willing to examine himself. Thank you for saying that, I replied quietly. I didn't stand up for you, he continued. Not against Amanda, not against Mom, not even against my own expectations that you would just adapt to whatever the family needed. No, you didn't, I confirmed without rancor. I've thought a lot about that barbecue. About Amanda's joke and how everyone laughed. How I laughed. He swallowed hard. I keep thinking about what you said. Challenge accepted. I didn't understand then what you meant. And now? Now I realize you were declaring independence. From all of us. His voice held equal parts admiration and regret. We talked for nearly an hour, longer than the half hour I'd allocated. Gregory shared how the family dynamics had shifted. In my absence, Amanda's increased criticism extending to his new girlfriend, Patricia's tightening control over family gatherings, Richard's disappointment when Gregory declined a promotion that would have required relocating. I'm seeing everything differently, he explained. Like someone adjusted the contrast on a photo I've been staring at my whole life. When our coffee cups emptied, we both recognized the natural conclusion of our conversation. As we stood to leave, Gregory asked the question I'd been expecting. Is there any chance for us? Not right away, but eventually? I considered his face, once the center of my world. I felt affection, compassion, even a whisper of the old attraction. But the tether had been severed, not just by Amanda's joke or my departure, but by the year of growth that followed. I think we both needed to become different people, I said gently. And I like who I'm becoming now. He nodded, accepting this truth with surprising grace. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. We both were, I corrected. You just needed different circumstances to discover it. We parted with a brief, platonic hug that felt like proper closure. As I watched him walk away, I realized I truly wished him well in building a life that was authentically his, not just an extension of the Caldwell legacy. The final confrontation came unexpectedly, as I was collecting my portfolio from the conference room. Amanda entered just as I was preparing to leave, her purposeful stride suggesting she'd been waiting for this opportunity to catch me alone. I need to ask you something, she said without preamble, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. All right. I agreed, curious despite myself. Did you take this project knowing it was connected to our family? No, I answered truthfully. I discovered the Sheffield-Caldwell connection after accepting the Westwood offer. By then, the contract was signed. She studied me, seemingly assessing the truth of my statement. And you didn't think to recuse yourself once you knew? Why would I? I asked simply. I'm extremely good at what I do, Amanda. This project needed someone with exactly my skills and aesthetic sensibility. The fact that your family company might ultimately benefit from my work is incidental to my professional obligations. So it's just coincidence that exactly 1 year after you disappeared, you reappear working on a project connected to us? I had to smile at her persistence. Life rarely arranges itself with such perfect symmetry. But yes, essentially. I don't believe in coincidences that convenient, she countered. What would be the alternative explanation? I asked. That I orchestrated an elaborate year-long plan, building an entirely new career in another city, establishing relationships with agencies unconnected to your family, all culminating in this specific project? That would be giving you far more space in my thoughts than has actually been the case. The blunt assessment landed visibly. Amanda blinked, perhaps for the first time considering that she might not have been central to my decisions at all. At the barbecue, she said after a pause. When I made that joke, It was just a joke. I never thought you'd actually leave. It wasn't just a joke, Amanda. It was the articulation of something you'd been communicating for years. That I was dispensable, forgettable, unimportant. I kept my tone conversational rather than accusatory. And you weren't wrong, in a way. In the context of your family, I was those things. What I needed to discover was that there are contexts where I'm not. Amanda's composure slipped momentarily, revealing something rarely seen: uncertainty. Gregory hasn't been the same since you left. Gregory is finding his own way, I replied. As am I. And there's no chance of reconciliation? The question seemed driven by family concerns rather than genuine care for either Gregory or me. We've reconciled in the only way that matters, I said. We've both acknowledged the truth of our marriage and found peace with its ending. Amanda nodded slowly, absorbing this finality. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. Your presentation yesterday, it was genuinely good work. I would have said so regardless of who you were. Coming from Amanda, this professional acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift. I thanked her with simple sincerity, neither overvaluing the compliment nor dismissing it. As I left the hotel to prepare for the evening's closing dinner, I felt a strange lightness. I had faced each Caldwell individually, navigating these encounters, not as the insecure outsider of last year, but as a confident professional with clear boundaries. The family that had once loomed so large in my life now seemed properly proportioned, just people with their own limitations and complexities. The final dinner that evening unfolded with surprising ease. The Caldwells and the Westwood team were seated at separate tables, creating natural distance without obvious avoidance. When industry colleagues introduced me to Richard as the designer behind Sheffield's brilliant rebrand, he acknowledged my work with professional courtesy. When Patricia complimented my dress during a chance encounter at the dessert station, I accepted graciously. Most tellingly, when Amanda's presentation on upcoming marketing trends included a slide featuring one of my designs with proper attribution, I recognized it for what it was: a public professional acknowledgement that would have been unthinkable a year ago. As the evening concluded, I exchanged contact information with several potential clients, confirmed next steps with Thomas, and said appropriate goodbyes to industry colleagues. Gregory approached briefly, simply wishing me safe travels and good luck with a sincerity that needed no elaboration. Leaving the venue, I felt no dramatic sense of triumph or closure. Instead, I experienced the quiet satisfaction of having reclaimed not just my professional identity, but my personal sovereignty. The Caldwells were now simply people I had once known intimately who now occupied appropriate space in my past rather than outsized significance in my present. Amanda's challenge, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice, had been not just accepted, but transcended. I had disappeared from their world, only to reappear transformed in my own. 1 month after the marketing conference, I sat across from Eleanor at our regular corner table in her coffee shop. Seattle rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a cozy backdrop for our conversation. So the Sheffield campaign officially launches next week, Eleanor noted, refilling my cup from the ceramic pot between us. That must feel satisfying after everything. It does, I agreed. Thomas called yesterday to say early retailer response has been overwhelmingly positive. They're already discussing extending the rebrand to additional product lines. And the Caldwell connection? I considered the question thoughtfully. It's become professionally cordial. Richard's marketing director reached out about potentially collaborating on future projects through proper channels, with clear contracts. I haven't decided yet whether to pursue it. That's quite an evolution, Eleanor observed. From family, outcast to sought-after professional resource. Life has interesting symmetries sometimes, I acknowledged with a small smile. The truth was, the Sheffield project had marked a turning point in my career. The visibility of the campaign had attracted attention from other potential clients. My portfolio now included work that reflected my authentic design voice rather than watered-down compromises. Most importantly, I approached each opportunity with clear boundaries and confidence in my value. The divorce had been finalized with surprising smoothness. Gregory had been fair in the financial settlement, even generous in certain aspects. We maintained no direct contact, but our respective lawyers reported professional cooperation throughout the process. My only personal request, keeping my original engagement ring that had belonged to my grandmother rather than the Caldwell family diamond Gregory had later insisted I upgrade to, was granted without argument. My regular therapy sessions with Dr. Lewis continued, though we had reduced the frequency from weekly to bi-weekly. Our conversations had evolved from processing acute emotional trauma to exploring healthier patterns for future relationships and continued self-discovery. The interesting thing about healing, Dr. Lewis had noted in our last session, is that it's rarely a return to your previous state. It's a transformation into something new that incorporates the experience without being defined by it. This observation resonated deeply as I navigated my reconstructed life. I wasn't trying to recapture who I'd been before meeting Gregory. I was integrating that younger self's passion and confidence with the wisdom and boundaries hard-earned through difficulty. Jessica visited Seattle for a long weekend, marveling at the changes in both my external circumstances and internal landscape. "You laugh differently now," she observed during a hike through Discovery Park. "More from your belly, less from your throat." "That's oddly specific," I teased. "But accurate," she insisted. "You used to laugh like someone who needed permission. Now you laugh like someone who's giving herself permission." These subtle transformations accumulated gradually. I found myself speaking up in creative meetings without rehearsing my thoughts first. I began dating casually, nothing serious yet, but enjoying the simple pleasure of connecting with interesting people without need for immediate definition. I joined a community garden and discovered unexpected joy in growing tangible, living things. An unexpected development came in the form of a friendship with Charlotte, Michael's wife. She reached out via professional email, ostensibly to inquire about design services for a pediatric clinic she volunteered with. Our initial coffee meeting evolved into genuine connection based on shared experiences as Caldwell outsiders and mutual professional respect. Amanda is actually taking parenting classes, Charlotte revealed during one of our lunch meetings. She's pregnant and determined not to repeat family patterns. The news surprised me, not just the pregnancy but Amanda's self-awareness. "That's encouraging." "People can change when properly motivated," Charlotte observed. "The family dynamic shifted after you left, made some things visible that had been conveniently ignored. Whether my departure had been catalyst or merely coincidence, I took no particular credit for these evolutions. The Caldwell's journey was their own, just as mine was mine." 6 weeks after the marketing conference, I was selecting produce at a farmer's market when I heard a familiar voice. Amanda stood at the next stall, examining artisan cheese. Her pregnancy was visible now, creating a softer silhouette against her typically tailored appearance. Our eyes met with mutual recognition. After a moment's hesitation, she approached. "Vanessa, I didn't know you shopped here." "Every Saturday," I confirmed. "They have the best heirloom tomatoes in the city." The awkwardness between us was palpable, but not hostile. We exchanged brief pleasantries about the market, the weather, the upcoming product launch. Then Amanda surprised me with unexpected directness. "I've been thinking about what you said at the conference, about contexts where you're dispensable versus valued." She adjusted her bag uncomfortably. "I'm discovering something similar in preparing for motherhood. Everyone has advice about who I should become, how I should change. It's illuminating." "Contexts shape us," I acknowledged. "But they don't have to define us." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "The parenting class Charlotte probably told you about, it's helping me recognize some patterns, things I never questioned because they were just normal in our family." I heard the unspoken comparison to my own journey of recognition and separation. Self-awareness is powerful, I offered. Yes. She hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic vulnerability. I don't want my child to ever feel like they need to disappear to be seen. The admission revealed deeper reflection than I would have credited Amanda with a year ago. I didn't offer easy absolution. Our history was too complex for that. But I did offer simple human acknowledgement. That's a good place to start. We parted with no dramatic reconciliation, no promises of future connection, just a moment of genuine communication between two adults sharing brief intersection in life's journey. Walking home with my market purchases, I reflected on the strange trajectory that had brought me from the Caldwell barbecue to this present moment. The challenge Amanda had unknowingly set, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice, had indeed been the catalyst for profound transformation. I had disappeared from a life where I was diminished, only to reappear in one where I was valued. I had lost a family that required my conformity, only to build a community that celebrated my authenticity. I had abandoned security that came with compromise, embracing instead the uncertain adventure of self-determination. Last week, I had closed on a small house near the water, nothing grand by Caldwell standards, but perfectly suited to my needs and purchased entirely through my own earnings. As I arranged my furniture and hung artwork selected solely for my own pleasure, I experienced a profound sense of having created not just a home, but a life genuinely my own. The greatest irony of Amanda's cruel joke was that disappearing had made me more visible than I'd ever been, to colleagues who valued my creativity, to friends who appreciated my authentic self, and most importantly, to myself. The challenge had been not just accepted, but transformed into unexpected gift. That evening, as Seattle's skyline glittered against darkening water, I opened my journal and wrote the reflection that had been forming for months. Sometimes we must disappear from others' narratives to discover our own. The most powerful response to being unseen is not demanding vision from blind eyes, but finding the contexts where our true selves are not just visible, but celebrated. The opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed. It's becoming so fully present in your own life that external validation becomes unnecessary. The woman who had raised a hot dog in Defiant Toast 1 year ago could never have imagined the journey ahead. The woman writing these words could never return to who she had been. And in that transformation lay not tragedy, but triumph, the quiet, sustainable victory of reclaiming one's own life. Have you ever had a moment when someone's cruel words actually pushed you to make a life-changing decision? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.